Your first emotional reaction is often the only thing they were after. They do not always need your agreement. They just need your energy. That is why the bait feels so personal, so precise, so timed. But when you stop reacting on command, their whole strategy starts starving. By the end of this message, you will understand why your pause is power and how to use the 24-hour pause system to protect your peace. There is a reason some people seem less interested in the truth than in your reaction to the truth. That is the first thing you need to understand. In manipulative dynamics, your emotions are not always being engaged in a sincere way. Sometimes they are being harvested. Sometimes the goal of the interaction is not clarity, not resolution, not healing, not understanding. Sometimes the real goal is movement, a shift in your energy, a quick rise in your anger, a rush of defensiveness, a burst of guilt, a spiral of urgency. Anything that proves they can still reach inside you and pull something. That is the economy of human reactions. And once you see it, a lot of your past starts making sense. You remember the comment that seemed too perfectly timed, the text that arrived right when you were settling down, the accusation that came out of nowhere, but somehow hit the exact nerve that would make you want to defend yourself, the sarcastic remark that sounded casual on the surface yet felt engineered to provoke. The misunderstanding that kept getting repeated, even after you had already explained yourself clearly. It was never always about the content. It was often about the reaction. Because reactions are a kind of currency. A manipulative person learns what your emotional energy can purchase for them. If anger pulls you into a long argument, anger becomes useful. If guilt gets you to reopen a door you already closed, guilt becomes useful. If confusion gets you to over-explain, confusion gets you to over-explain. Confusion becomes useful. If urgency makes you abandon your own timing, urgency becomes useful. They may not think in those exact words, but the pattern still functions that way. They are looking for emotional leverage. That is why some people seem strangely persistent about topics that should have died already. They are not always searching for understanding. They are checking whether the old button still works. They want to know whether the old sentence still gets a rise out of you. Whether the old criticism still hooks your identity, whether the old guilt still makes you fold, whether the old silence still makes you chase. They are checking the machine. And if you have been emotionally available for a long time, this can be hard to recognize at first. You may think you are just being honest, just being expressive, just standing up for yourself, just making sure things are clear. But if every interaction keeps ending with you depleted, stirred up, regretful, or mentally crowded, then something deeper is happening. Someone may be living off your reactions, not in a mystical way, in a practical one. Your reaction gives them information. It gives them access. It gives them timing. It tells them what still hurts. It tells them what still controls your attention. It tells them how easily they can pull you out of your own center. And this is why emotional detachment is so powerful. Not because you stop feeling, not because you become cold, not because you pretend nothing matters. Emotional detachment, in a healthy sense, means you stop offering immediate emotional access to everyone who knows how to knock on your nervous system. That is wisdom. A lot of people hear the word detachment and imagine numbness. But that is not what real detachment is. Real detachment is not a dead heart. It is a governed heart. It is the refusal to let every provocation become an emergency inside you. It is the ability to feel something without instantly handing that feeling to the person who triggered it. It is the space between impact and response where your discernment gets to speak before your wound does. That space is holy because many people do not lose power in the argument itself. They lose power in the first 10 seconds. The message comes in, and their body answers before their wisdom does. The tone changes, and they are already drafting the paragraph. The accusation lands, and they are already mentally defending themselves. The jab hits, and they are already trying to prove who they really are. The guilt enters, and they are already rearranging their plans. That is how energy gets stolen, not only through the conflict, through immediacy. Immediacy is expensive when someone knows how to weaponize your emotions. That is why your pause matters so much. The pause interrupts the transaction. It keeps your reaction from being instantly converted into access. It breaks the handoff. It says, you may have touched a feeling, but you do not automatically get to own the outcome of that feeling. And for many sensitive people, that will be a new way of living, because they are used to moving quickly when emotion rises, used to answering right away, used to clarifying right away, used to smoothing things over right away, used to explaining their intentions right away, used to resolving discomfort before they have even asked whether the discomfort belongs to them to carry. That pattern feels like maturity when you are inside it, but often it is just training. Training to abandon your center the moment someone applies pressure. That is why the economy of human reactions is so dangerous. It turns your sensitivity into a supply chain. The more readable you are, the easier you are to manage. The more immediate your responses, the less effort it takes for someone to steer the atmosphere. They do not need to overpower you if they can predict you. They do not need to win fairly if they can activate you early. And the truth is, many people are far more invested in your reaction than they are in the issue itself. You can tell by how strangely calm they seem after provoking you. You can tell by how the conversation gets blurrier once you become emotional. You can tell by how they back away once they get the response they wanted. You can tell by how they keep returning to the same pressure points instead of genuinely moving forward. You can tell by how your distress seems to settle them. That last one matters. Some people feel powerful when they can disturb your peace, not because they are strong, but because they are unstable. Not because they understand you, but because your reaction reassures them they still have reach. This is why certain people keep doing the one specific thing they know gets under your skin. It is not always because they forgot. It is not always because they are that clueless. Sometimes they remember very well. That is exactly why they keep touching the place. Because the reaction confirms access, and once you know that, you stop interpreting every provocation at face value. You start asking better questions. Why is this being brought up now? Why does this person keep circling the same wound? Why does the misunderstanding keep surviving even after clarity was offered? Why do they seem more energized by my reaction than by actual resolution? Why does this pattern always intensify when I am becoming calmer? Those questions matter because they shift you out of the content and into the function. Function reveals more than words. A message may say one thing, but what is it trying to produce? A question may sound innocent, but what is it trying to touch? A comment may look casual, but what is it trying to wake up in you? That is how bait works. And that takes us into the second layer, because manipulators rarely ask for your anger directly. They fish for it. They bait. They drop a sentence and wait. They withhold clarity and wait. They create just enough offense to stir you, then act confused when you respond. They half insult you, half joke with you, and wait to see whether you will take the hook. They send something late at night when your guard is low. They accuse you in vague language so you do the labor of proving yourself. They bring up old topics that were already closed. They phrase things in ways that make a quick reaction feel irresistible. That is bait. It is designed to feel like something you have to answer now. That urgency is part of the trap. Because anger wants movement. Anger wants expression. Anger wants to close the gap between what was felt and what will be said. That is why bait is often so effective. It knows the body moves faster than wisdom when the wound is fresh. Maybe they send a message that misrepresents your intentions. Maybe they say something publicly that you know is unfair. Maybe they casually mention a subject they know has already hurt you. Maybe they accuse you of being cold right when you are trying to establish peace. Maybe they act disrespectful, then cloak it in humor so your response can be painted as overreaction. In that moment, the body says, respond, correct this, defend yourself, set the record straight, do not let that stand. And sometimes there is a place for clear response, but not from the hook. That is the difference. Bait wants you to answer from activation, not alignment. It wants your nervous system first, your discernment second. It wants heat before clarity. It wants movement before wisdom. It wants the wound on the microphone before the spirit has a chance to speak. And when you do that, the whole interaction changes. Your tone becomes their evidence. Your emotion becomes the new subject. Your paragraph becomes material. Your quick reply becomes proof that they can still access you on demand. Now the conversation is no longer about what happened. It is about what they got out of you. That is why so many people regret reactions they did not regret in the moment. The moment felt justified. The moment felt necessary. The moment felt like finally saying what needed to be said. But later, when the emotional smoke clears, You realize the response did not free you. It fed the cycle. It gave more than it solved. Think about a text message you regret sending because you replied in 5 seconds. You felt the jolt. You wrote from the jolt. You sent from the jolt. And later you saw that the person did not even engage the substance. They engaged your tone, or your length, or your emotion, or they disappeared after stirring you up, or they came back calmer than before because the real objective had already been achieved. They got the reaction. That is why bait is so frustrating. It is not always after truth. It is often after proof of access. Once you understand that, you stop treating your anger like something that must be delivered immediately in order to remain valid. You realize that a feeling can be real without requiring an instant audience. You realize that being provoked does not obligate you to perform your provocation in front of the person who caused it. You realize that some of the strongest responses are not quick ones. This is especially important for people who were trained to equate speed with sincerity. They think if I do not answer immediately, I am being fake. If I do not address it right now, I am being weak. If I do not defend myself in the moment, then I am letting them win. But quick expression is not always strength. Sometimes quick expression is exactly what was being engineered. The manipulator does not always need you destroyed. They just need you dysregulated. They do not always need a long-term hold over your life. Sometimes they just want a temporary collapse of your peace, a reaction large enough to reset the emotional balance, a reminder that your center can still be interrupted. That is what your anger provides if it is ungoverned. It becomes food. Food for their control. Food for their certainty. Food for their certainty. Food for their narrative. Food for their sense of access. Food for the pattern itself. And this is where the shift begins. The moment you stop asking, how do I make them understand me? And start asking, what is this interaction trying to extract from me? You begin recovering power, because then you can see the bait for what it is. Not every rude comment deserves an instant courtroom. Not every accusation deserves immediate defense. Not every emotionally loaded text deserves an instant paragraph. Not every provocation deserves your freshest energy. Some things deserve a pause so complete that the hook falls into empty space. That kind of pause does something profound. It reveals who was seeking truth and who was seeking reaction. It reveals whether the issue can survive without emotional fuel. It reveals whether the person wanted understanding or just access. It reveals how much of their confidence depended on your immediacy. And that is where this starts becoming less about them and more about your authority. Because once you stop biting every hook, the whole field changes. The old bait loses some of its power. The old timing becomes less effective. The old pressure stops finding the same opening. But none of that happens if you still believe your first feeling must become your first response. That is the deeper shift that has to happen next. Because the pause is not only spiritual wisdom, it is also training for your mind, your body, and your nervous system. And once you understand what is happening inside you in those first moments, you stop fearing the pause and start using it like a shield. The reason the pause feels so unnatural at first is because it goes against what your body has been trained to do under pressure. That is where the neuroscience matters. Because when someone provokes you, the event does not only happen in your thoughts, it happens in your system. Your heart rate can change. Your chest can tighten. Your stomach can drop. Your jaw can clench. Your breathing can shorten. Your mind can start racing ahead, building arguments, replaying what was said, predicting what must be defended, what must be corrected, what must be answered right now. That rush feels like clarity, but very often it is activation, and there is a huge difference between the two. Activation says, move. Wisdom says, wait. Activation says, protect yourself immediately. Wisdom says, let the first wave pass before you decide what this actually means. This is what so many people never learn. The first surge of emotion after provocation is not always the best place to make meaning. It is often just the body reacting to threat, disrespect, confusion, accusation, or perceived loss of control. That reaction is real. It should not be mocked or denied. But it also should not automatically become instruction. A feeling can be valid without being ready to lead. That sentence will change lives. Because many people have been taught one of two unhealthy extremes. Either they suppress the feeling and pretend it is not there, or they obey the feeling the second it appears. Both extremes cost peace. The pause is something different. The pause says, I will acknowledge what I feel without handing the microphone to it too early. That is emotional maturity, and that is why the manipulative person hates it so much. Because manipulation depends on collapsing the space between trigger and response. It depends on you becoming your first surge. It depends on the bait landing and your nervous system immediately serving the moment back to them. But the pause lengthens that space. It gives your wiser mind time to come online. It gives your breathing time to settle. It gives your spirit time to separate what was felt from what is actually required. That changes the whole interaction. Think about what happens when a message hits you wrong. In the first seconds, your interpretation can become absolute. You assume tone. You assume motive. You assume urgency. You assume what they meant. You assume what will happen if you do not respond quickly. But if you give it time, sometimes your perspective widens. You notice what was bait instead of truth. You notice what was vague on purpose. You notice what was trying to make you rush. You notice what did not actually require immediate access to you. Time changes the chemistry of the moment. Not magically, physically. The body cannot stay at peak emotional charge forever. The surge eventually begins to come down if you stop feeding it. Your breathing shifts. Your heart rate begins to settle. Your mind becomes less crowded. The sentence you wanted to send no longer feels as perfect. The issue separates from the drama around the issue. You start hearing yourself again. That is what the pause protects, the return of your own mind. Without that return, you are much easier to manipulate, because a dysregulated person is easier to steer than a centered one. A dysregulated person wants relief, and manipulators know that quick response can feel like relief in the moment. You think, if I just say it now, I will feel better. If I just answer, fix it, correct it, expose it, explain it, maybe I can stop carrying it. But immediate response often does not end the pressure. It extends it. Because now you have entered the field on the terms the bait created. Now your body is still lit up while your words are leaving your mouth. Now your nervous system is trying to solve something before it has even come back into balance. That is why people so often say things that are emotionally accurate but strategically expensive. They are telling the truth from the wrong state. And the wrong state can turn a valid point into usable material for the other person. This is why the neuroscience of the pause matters spiritually too. It teaches you that self-command is not pretending not to feel. It is learning not to let every feeling become an immediate transaction. It is learning to sit with the heat long enough for the deeper truth to emerge underneath it. Because often the first feeling is not the whole feeling. At first you think you are angry. Then after some time you realize you feel disrespected, or exposed, or tired, or grieved, or disappointed that the same pattern showed up again, or sad that someone you cared about still knows exactly where to press, or aware that the message was not even about the issue. It was about control. You do not always get to that layer in the first 5 minutes. You get there when the pause makes room. That is why the pause is not passive. It is investigative. It slows the body enough for the truth to separate itself from the adrenaline. And once that happens, you stop speaking only from reaction. You start speaking from discernment. Or sometimes, more powerfully, you decide not to speak at all. That possibility frightens manipulators more than people realize. Because some people are deeply dependent on momentum. They need you reacting while the emotional charge is still high. They need you before you sleep on it, before you pray on it, before you reread the message from a calmer state, before you show it to someone wise, before you realize how obvious the bait really was. That is why urgency so often accompanies manipulation. Answer now. Explain now. Clear this up right now. Do not leave me waiting. Why are you being quiet? Why are you taking so long? Say what you need to say. Underneath all of that is one fear. That time will weaken their access. And very often it does. Because when the pause stretches, the manipulator starts starving. Not literally starving, of course, but starving of the thing they were counting on. Immediate fuel, the quick emotional burst, the paragraph, the defense, the guilty response, the angry reply, the chaste clarification, the panicked explanation, the proof that they still know how to move your inner world on demand. When that proof does not come, the atmosphere changes. At first they may wait confidently. They expect the old pattern. They expect your usual speed. They expect the immediate attempt to fix, fight, or defend, but then the delay lengthens. No paragraph. No emotional spill. No late-night unraveling. No urgent self-exposure. That silence starts doing something to them. It removes feedback. They cannot tell whether the hook landed the way it used to. They cannot measure how much guilt was triggered. They cannot tell whether you were spiraling. They cannot tell whether you are about to reopen the argument, explain yourself, or chase resolution. They do not know where they are inside you anymore. That uncertainty is uncomfortable for people who rely on reading and steering reactions, and this is where many people accidentally lose the power of the pause. The silence starts working, but then they get anxious inside the silence. They want to explain why they are quiet. They want to soften the delay. They want to send a little message just so they do not look rude. They want to manage the other person's discomfort with not having immediate access. Do not rush to do that, because then you feed the same cycle from inside the pause. The point is not just to say nothing outwardly, while internally remaining completely available. The point is to withdraw the emotional supply long enough for your own peace to return. That is what starving the manipulator actually means. It means the old system is not getting fresh energy from you every time it presses a button. And yes, when that begins, some people act strange. They may double text. They may become sweeter for a moment. They may become sharper. They may send something else to intensify the charge. They may suddenly act confused, offended, or wounded. They may try new angles when the old one does not work. Why? Because the original hook did not produce enough movement. That is valuable information. It shows that your stillness is not empty. It is active. It is interrupting the machinery. It is showing you which people were relying on immediate reaction more than they were relying on honest connection. Think of a text message you regret sending because you replied in 5 seconds. You know the one. Your body got hot. Your fingers moved fast. You wrote the paragraph that felt powerful in the moment. You hit send. And the second it left your phone, the energy started changing. Maybe you reread it and wished you had cut half of it. Maybe the other person ignored the substance and focused on your tone. Maybe they showed the message to someone else. Maybe they replied with 3 cold words after receiving all your energy. Maybe they went silent, leaving you exposed and restless. Maybe you realized the message told them exactly how to get to you. That regret is not always about what you felt. It is often about how quickly you delivered it. Now think of a different moment. A moment where you did not reply right away. Maybe you wanted to. Maybe the first draft was sitting in your notes. Maybe your mind kept building the response. But you waited. An hour, a night, a day. And when you came back to it, the whole thing looked different. The urgency had dropped. The wording had softened. The real issue had become clearer. Maybe the best response got shorter. Maybe it became firmer. Maybe it disappeared altogether because you realized the message did not deserve your energy in the first place. That difference is the power of the pause in action. Same trigger. Different state. Different outcome. That is not weakness. That is self-command. And the more you experience that difference, the more you realize something very freeing. You do not owe anybody your most activated self. Not because your feelings are unimportant, because your feelings deserve better leadership than panic. That is what the pause gives them. Leadership. It tells your anger, I hear you, but you are not driving. It tells your hurt, I will not abandon you, but I will not expose you recklessly. It tells your nervous system we are safe enough to slow down before deciding. It tells the other person, your timing does not control mine anymore. That last part is what changes the power dynamic, because for many people, the deepest hold others had over them was not in the content of the conflict. It was in the speed of the access, the fact that their inner world could be activated and extracted so quickly, the fact that one text could ruin an evening. One comment could consume an entire day. One accusation could pull paragraphs out of them. One tone shift could make them abandon peace and re-enter emotional labor immediately. The pause cuts into that. It says my peace will not be that interruptible anymore. Not because I do not care, because I care too much about what leaves me now. And once that begins becoming your way of living, you start seeing just how hungry some dynamics were for your immediacy. It becomes obvious who respected your timing and who only enjoyed your quick availability. It becomes obvious who is seeking clarity and who is feeding off activation. It becomes obvious how many situations look powerful only because you were meeting them too early. That recognition is everything, because once you truly understand what your pause is doing in the body and in the dynamic, you stop seeing it as avoidance. You stop seeing it as coldness. You stop seeing it as losing. The pause is not losing. It is refusing to enter a rigged exchange with your system already inflamed. And this is where the next step becomes practical, because knowing the pause matters is one thing, using it with structure is another. You need a system for those first 24 hours, a way to handle the surge, the drafts, the silence, the mental replay, the temptation to respond, and the urge to explain your pause while you are still inside it. That is what we need to talk about next, because when the pause becomes intentional, it stops being accidental silence. It becomes strategy. It becomes strategy the moment your pause stops being random and starts becoming structured. That is what the 24-hour pause system is for. Not to play games, not to punish people with silence, not to avoid every difficult conversation forever. It is a system for protecting your clarity during the period when your emotions are most likely to be used against you. It gives your spirit time to settle, your mind time to organize, and your nervous system time to return to a state where you can actually choose instead of merely react. Because that is the real difference. A reaction is what leaves you quickly. A response is what leaves you truthfully. The 24-hour pause system protects the distance between those two things. The first part is this: do not answer from impact. The moment the message lands, the comment hits, the accusation rises, or the bait shows up, say this to yourself internally: I do not have to answer from first impact. I am allowed to feel this without exporting it yet. That sentence alone can save people from so much regret, because impact is not always intelligence. Impact is the first contact point. It is the jolt. It is the heat. It is the place where your body is still trying to register what happened. If you speak from there, you are usually giving the other person access to you before you've even checked what is real, what is exaggerated by activation, what deserves a boundary, what deserves no response, and what deserves to wait. So the first rule is simple: no immediate reply when you feel charged. Not because your feelings do not matter, because they matter too much to be handed over in their rawest form. Sometimes that means putting the phone down. Sometimes it means stepping away from the conversation. Sometimes it means reading the message once and refusing to reread it 15 times in the same emotional state. Sometimes it means not responding to the tone at all until you can hear your own. That is where the system starts. The second part is this: contain the first wave privately. You need somewhere for the energy to go that is not the manipulator, not the person pressuring you, not the emotionally loaded conversation itself. If you do not contain the first wave privately, you will be tempted to discharge it publicly. That is how people send paragraphs they regret, say things they never meant to say, or reopen dynamics they were trying to leave. So during the pause, let the feeling move somewhere safe. Write the draft and do not send it. Speak the truth out loud alone. Journal what you actually feel before politeness edits it. Pray honestly. Take a walk and let the body come down. Breathe until the urgency stops pretending to be wisdom. This is not suppression. This is containment. Suppression buries the feeling. Containment holds the feeling until it can be handled well. That difference matters, because many people think pausing means pretending not to care. It does not. It means caring enough not to make your first emotional wave the final version of your communication. And once that wave is contained, the third part becomes possible. Name what is actually being touched. This is where discernment gets sharper. Ask yourself, what exactly am I feeling right now? Is it only anger? Or is anger covering embarrassment, grief, disrespect, fear, exhaustion, disappointment, old pain, or the ache of realizing this pattern is still happening again? What exactly did this interaction try to pull out of me? What button did it press? Why did it work so quickly? These questions slow the whole thing down, because a lot of manipulative dynamics survive when you stay focused only on the surface sentence. But when you begin naming what is actually being touched, you stop being as easy to steer. You realize this was not just about one text. It touched your fear of being misrepresented, or your fear of not being believed, or your old need to defend your heart, or your discomfort with being misunderstood. or your exhaustion from always having to explain yourself to the same kinds of people. Now the issue is clearer, and clarity changes tone. A person who knows what they feel is harder to bait than a person who only knows they feel something urgent. Then comes the fourth part. Test the message against tomorrow. This is one of the strongest pieces of the 24-hour pause system. Ask yourself, if I sleep on this, will I still want to say it the same way? If I wake up tomorrow and read this again, will this still feel necessary, accurate, and worthy of my energy? If someone wise looked at this exchange tomorrow, would they tell me to answer, shorten my answer, delay my answer further, or not answer at all? Tomorrow is a powerful filter, because many things that feel urgent at night feel thin in the morning. Many things that felt like disrespect reveal themselves to be bait. Many things that felt like they needed a page only need a sentence. Many things that felt like they needed a sentence need silence. Time exposes proportion, and that is what manipulators hate. They hate proportion. They want intensity. They want heat. They want the moment before proportion returns. But once tomorrow gets involved, your peace has a chance to speak with more authority than your adrenaline did. Then comes the fifth part of the system. Choose the smallest true response. This part is life-changing for people who are used to emotional over-delivery. You do not have to send the whole essay. You do not have to answer every accusation. You do not have to explain your whole character because somebody misread one moment. You do not have to make yourself fully understandable to people committed to misunderstanding you. Choose the smallest true response. Sometimes that is, I'm not discussing this right now. Sometimes it is, I disagree with that. Sometimes it is, that does not work for me. Sometimes it is, I've said what I needed to say. Sometimes it is, I won't be responding further. Sometimes it is no response at all. Small does not mean weak. Small often means governed. A lot of people were trained to think power is in saying more, but in many manipulative exchanges, more is exactly what gives the other person material, more details to twist, more emotion to study, more phrases to quote back later, more openings to enter, more evidence that they still know how to pull full explanations out of you. The smallest true response denies that access. It says, I will not keep spending myself to prove what peace already knows. Then comes the sixth part, release the outcome. This is the hardest part for many people. You pause. You contain the first wave. You name what is being touched. You test the message against tomorrow. You choose the smallest true response. But then another struggle begins. You want the response to work exactly the way you hoped. You want them to understand. You want them to feel what you meant. You want closure. You want resolution. You want the interaction to end with mutual clarity and emotional symmetry. Sometimes that happens. Often it does not. And if your peace still depends on how they receive your response, then part of your power is still sitting in their hands. So the final part of the system is release. Release the need to control their interpretation. Release the need to correct every false impression. Release the need to keep re-entering because they did not receive your truth cleanly the first time. Release the fantasy that the perfect paragraph will transform a manipulative dynamic into an honest one. It usually will not. Sometimes the most powerful thing the 24-hour pause system gives you is not a better reply. It gives you the grace to see that a reply is no longer the real issue. The real issue was access, and the pause changed that. That is the system. Do not answer from impact. Contain the first wave privately. Name what is actually being touched. Test the message against tomorrow. Choose the smallest true response. Release the outcome. That is how you move from reaction to rule. That is how you stop feeding moments that were designed to consume you. That is how your silence becomes disciplined instead of accidental. And once you begin living this way, something deeper starts changing inside you. Stillness stops feeling passive. It starts feeling powerful. That is the final shift, because many people were taught that power always looks loud, immediate, confrontational, and visible. They think power means winning the argument on the spot. Power means saying the sharpest thing. Power means not letting anything slide. Power means always having the perfect comeback ready in real time. But that is not the deepest power. The deepest power is self-command. It is the ability to feel the pull and not move just because the pull is there. It is the ability to be misunderstood for a moment without collapsing into explanation. It is the ability to let your body settle before your mouth speaks. It is the ability to stop giving instant access to anyone who knows how to create emotional motion inside you. That kind of stillness is expensive. Not everyone can afford it emotionally, because stillness requires trust. Trust in your discernment. Trust in your timing. Trust that silence does not make you weak. Trust that a delay does not mean you lost. Trust that your power does not disappear just because you did not perform it immediately. And many manipulative people are deeply unsettled by that kind of stillness, because stillness breaks the old story. They expected quick emotion. They got quiet. They expected a paragraph. They got a pause. They expected defense. They got space. They expected the old access point to open. It did not. That is when the dynamic starts starving for real. Not because you punished them, because you stopped feeding the exchange with the exact energy it was built to pull from you. And that does not only frustrate manipulation, it reveals character. Healthy people may not always love delay, but they can respect it. Healthy people do not need your most activated self to feel secure. Healthy people can handle a boundary without turning the pause into an accusation against your character. Healthy people are not thrown into panic because you needed time to think, pray, breathe, or settle before answering. That contrast will teach you a lot. It will show you who honored your immediacy and who simply enjoyed it. It will show you who wanted clarity and who wanted quick access. It will show you who can meet your calm and who only knows how to work with your activation. That is useful revelation. And it is also deeply healing, because the 24-hour pause system does more than protect you from regrettable reactions. It rebuilds your relationship with yourself. It teaches your nervous system that every trigger is not a command. It teaches your emotions that being felt does not mean being obeyed immediately. It teaches your mouth that truth can wait until it is stable. It teaches your spirit that peace is not something you recover after the damage anymore. Peace can be the thing that decides what leaves you in the first place. That is a different life, a calmer one, a cleaner one, a less interruptible one. Imagine how many problems lose power when they can no longer get your 5-second self. Imagine how many cycles weaken when your first wave stays with you instead of going straight back into the conflict. Imagine how much less mental residue you carry when you stop delivering your rawest emotions into situations that were designed to misuse them. Imagine how much stronger your boundaries feel when they come from settled truth rather than emotional smoke. That is not avoidance. That is mastery. And yes, some people will accuse you of changing. They will say you are distant now, harder to read now, less reactive now, more guarded now, less active now, more guarded now, not as easy now. That may all be true, but not in the way they mean it. You are not becoming loveless. You are becoming governed. You are not becoming cold. You are becoming careful about where your energy goes. You are not becoming detached from truth. You are becoming detached from the need to deliver truth from an activated state. There is wisdom in that. There is spiritual maturity in that. Because stillness is not emptiness when it is anchored in discernment. It is a form of covering. It is the place where your peace remains intact long enough for wisdom to lead. It is where your anger gets purified before it becomes language. It is where your hurt gets honored without being exposed recklessly. It is where your next move belongs to you again. That is real power. Not controlling others, not winning every exchange, not always getting the last word. Real power is not being so easily pulled out of yourself anymore. If this message is putting words to a shift your spirit has been trying to make, let that settle in you. You do not owe anyone your immediate outrage. You do not owe anyone instant access to your most activated self. You do not owe every provocation a same-day performance. You do not owe manipulation the energy it feeds on. What you owe yourself is better. A pause, a breath, a night, a prayer, a return to clarity, a chance to answer from truth instead of impact. So move forward with this. Let the text sit. Let the comment wait. Let the heat pass through before you decide what belongs to your mouth. Let tomorrow help you. Let the smallest true response become enough. Let stillness teach you what power actually feels like. And remember this. The person trying to rush your reaction is often the same person who benefits from you not having time to think. The dynamic trying to pull quick emotion out of you is often weakened the moment you stop responding on command. The exchange that feels most urgent is not always the one that deserves your fastest energy. Sometimes the strongest thing you can say is not said in the first minute. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is become unhookable. If this spoke to your spirit, leave your testimony in the comments and pass this message to someone who needs their peace back before they send that next text.